Good morning. Y'all know it begins today. I will let you know right up front that I've got 110 bills, I think. We're not going to do 110 bills. So some of you will not get your legislation out. Can you hear me now? Okay. 110 bills. Some of you will not get your bills out, either because of time or they're just bad bills. If you've been on that wall twice about your bill, go away. Okay, one other thing. If I get my two chairmen to shut up over there, we'll be all right. There will be bills that are still coming out that will be on. We're going to have rules again. So there will be new bills that are coming out, and so that we will have you on the wall on Wednesday for those bills. But again, if you've asked twice, you're good to go. Y'all bow with me. Gracious Heavenly Father, here we are asking you to forgive us, to say thank you for another wonderful day in your kingdom, to ask you to be with us. Let's keep us calm during this storm that we'll go through the next 3 days. You know us. You know our sins. You still love us. Thank you for the gift of life through your Son. I ask these things in his name. Amen. Okay. Ms. Taylor, ready to begin. Quick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring you two little itty-bitty bills that I'm sure you want. The first one is House Bill 934, modified structure, page 4, 2/3 of the way down. And this is local legislation. It's passed by our Board of Commissioners and all of our delegation for Thomas County. They've asked for their magistrate court to be nonpartisan. All of the other judges are.
Next one. Second bill.
Next bill, okay. The next bill is House Bill 938. This is an insurance department bill, and it simply amends the existing code for credit life insurance agencies and subagents only. It's streamlining and will make it easier. Thank you.
No questions, thank you. Now, I told you not to come. Which one? Wait a second, that's Earl's bill, and he's not going to admit it. Mr. Jaspers.
Yes, sir.
Get up there in the hole and let's go.
Yeah, let's move this chair. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Committee. I bring before you House Bill 948 from the Agriculture and Consumer Affairs Committee. It's on page 2 at the top. This bill is about the free market and consumer choice and the certainty for business to sell goods that are regulated by the USDA, FDA, and Georgia Department of Agriculture. This bill prohibits any city or municipality from banning the sale of goods that are regulated for legal sale by a city. The recent development On Thursday, from the Attorney General's office ruled that cities. Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
What part of quick didn't you understand?
Let's try and do a good job, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, so as I understand this, this ties our law to federal regulations, and if the federal regulations change, then what can or cannot be sold would be changed in Georgia. Is that right?
It would, unless we act on it.
Thank you.
Ms. Hughley.
That's fine. I just wanted clarification. I'm good.
Is it not true that cities and counties are making rules and regulations every day?
Yes, sir. Those rules and regulations that aren't in conflict.
Is it not true that we give them rights because they are creatures of this General Assembly?
Yes, sir.
No more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I bring before you today two bills. H.R. 238, which is the top of page 5. This is a constitutional amendment to allow the voters of Georgia to create the Georgia Outdoor Stewardship Act to send up to 0.75% of all state sales and use tax to be used for conservation of land, wildlife, and improvements to our state parks. Along with that is HB 332, which you should have a substitute that was offered by Chairman Smith and Leader Burns, which is the enabling legislation of the amendment, which goes with that bill as well. And I would appreciate your support. I am in favor of the substitute and the minor changes that were brought to us by the State Treasurer's Office to carry out their duties.
On your desk, you've got LC 440820S. Mr. Burns or Mr. Smith? Y'all are the signers. Please.
The substitute does not change anything substantially within the bill. It merely addresses concerns that were brought to us by the state treasurer and eventually carrying out this legislation should it pass by this body.
Okay, what we're gonna vote on is the Rules Committee approving the substitute to go onto the floor. Do I hear a motion?
Move.
All those in favor signify by aye. It's on. It's been approved. It ain't gonna be on.
Thank you.
Okay. Everybody just kind of sit back and relax. Mr. Nimmer's got the floor for the next little while. Mr. Nimmer, he's got 7 bills. Listen up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'd like to ask for your consideration this morning on page 1, a movement on House Bill 642. This would give the authorization for the creation of a special improvement district up around the Beltline area here in Atlanta. Over on page 3, I would like to ask for this body's consideration on House Bill 808. This came to me from the Waycross Judicial Circuit. It deals only with the Waycross Judicial Circuit, changing their calendars of court. Also on page 3, House Bill 812. This adds the magistrate courts to the law library fee collection process. On page 4, House Bill 986. This deals with a stipend increase for the Waycross Judicial Circuit. All 6 counties in that circuit have passed unanimous resolutions supporting this. That's House Bill 986. Also on page 4, you'll see House Bill 927 and House Bill 982. These two bills deal with DFACs. One deals with, House Bill 927 deals with certain information given to parents on behalf of a child when a child is placed in care. And 982 deals with the timeframes in which the department shall search for relative care and tightening up the ability to be strict with a case plan when it is issued. And on page 5, the last bill, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate your grace and compassion towards me this morning, House Bill 877, dealing with modified risk tobacco products. I appreciate the consideration of this committee and this body. Thank you, sir.
Any questions? No questions, thank you. Mr. McCall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I only have two little old bills after that. House Bill 885 on page 2, third from the top. And what that does is allow agricultural burns during the summertime in the 54 county non-attainment area. There's certain things you have to do at certain times for ag to be able to continue with whatever they're doing on their farm. Also, page 5, first one under structured is House Bill 81, and it deals with rural hospitals and the bills that they can't collect, and it'll help a lot of us in rural Georgia get reelected.
And that bill is for hospitals that are run by local authorities, right?
Correct. Cities and counties, not private run stuff.
No questions, thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Mr. Tanner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Come to you to ask for HB 781, which is on the third page, and then the companion bill, constitutional amendment that goes with that, HR 992 on the 5th page. This deals with the flexibility in E-Splosh we talked about last week. And then my last bill is on the 4th page, HB 930. HB 930, that's the transit bill that came through the Transportation Committee last week that we've heard a lot about over the past year.
No questions. I would remind everybody on the resolution that takes 2/3, so be in your seats. Please vote for that.
Thank you.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. On the third page, about a quarter of the way down, I come to you under modified structured House Bill 696 would help build Georgia's technology ecosystem by offering parity in our tax system to multi-tenant data centers, the same exemption that we offer single-tenant data centers, provided they meet a $250 million minimum investment threshold. Mr. Chairman, I'd also mention, I think that Chairman Powell is going to offer an amendment in the committee today that deals with starting at line 70 on the third page to make clear that the $250 million minimum investment threshold applies to, that they have to meet, applies to the design and construction of the facility as well.
On your desk, you've got AM 430075. Mr. Powell, you want to tell us your words? I trust you. I don't trust him.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, this language was in the original bill, and in one of the redrafts, the Legislative Council deleted it without consulting with any of us, and so this is just replacing what was in the original bill.
Okay, you've heard the explanation. Do I hear a move? All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed, same sign. Okay. Anything else, Mr. Kelly?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman. Just glad to see y'all this morning. Hope you had a good weekend.
Mr. Deffenbaugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. On page 4, There's House Bill 855. And what this will do is just raise the surcharge from 1.5% to 3% on traffic violations to fund Joshua's Law for driver's ed.
That's a 1.5% add-on, is that right?
Correct. Goes from 1.5 to 3.
Mr. Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the gentleman up there, is it not true that when Joshua Law was originally passed, there was a 5% surcharge?
That is correct.
Is it also not true that about 6 or 7 years ago, we cut that back to 1.5% because money was going into the state treasury?
That is correct.
Is it not also true that now that they have used that 1.5% to create a system of scholarships for our school kids to take driver education, and they're running out of money? That's the reason we're asking for another 1.5% of that original 5%.
That is also correct.
No more questions, thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Administration.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. On page 4, halfway down on the page, HB 897, HB 897. This is the Georgia Power of Attorney Act, correcting some language issues caused in Senate committee last year on the Power of Attorney bill. Next two bills are on page 5. The first is, it's actually a resolution, H.R. 993. This is the constitutional amendment authorizing the creation of the statewide business court. And then toward the bottom of the page, HB 929. This is for water and sewer projects in the city of Atlanta, extending an existing sales tax. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Madam Pro Tem.
Yes, Representative, I had a question on 929. What is the term of the tax?
So currently it is, it was for 3 elections, 3 extensions, and this would just allow for an additional 3.
And what is the, what is the length of each?
4 years.
So this would allow for 6 more?
No, ma'am, 3 more.
3 more, okay. Thank you.
No more questions,
Thank you.
thank you. Ms. Beskin.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Today I have House Bill 820. This bill provides a new homestead exemption from city and school system taxes for a municipality that has an independent school system. It applies to a municipality located in more than one county that levels a sales tax for a metropolitan area system of public transportation.
No question.
I'm sorry, it is on page 5 under structured rule, the middle of that section.
Ms. Hughley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Beskins, can you just tell us in plain English who we're helping here?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question.
Can you explain to me who we're trying to help?
By the description of the terms of this bill, although it is a general bill, it applies only to the city of Atlanta, so it protects all Atlanta residential homeowners from dramatically increasing property tax bills for their taxes from Atlanta and from APS. And it would ensure that each year the property tax paid could go up no more than the lesser of the consumer price index or 3%. So it benefits every Atlanta taxpayer who lives in a homesteaded property.
Mr. Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the author, is this the way we do it in Savannah?
I think it is. Thank you for that question, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Beverly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would this legislation be in conflict with HB 642? Would it apply to the Beltline as well?
Representative Beverly, is that the legislation we just heard for the Special Improvement District?
Correct.
It's my understanding that it wouldn't, because a Special Improvement District, I think, would be a voluntarily imposed 3 mil tax for commercial residential. I don't know whether that would be paid by the commercial developers, so I don't think there's an overlap, but I can work with the author on that bill and give you some clarification. Thank you.
No more questions. No more questions.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have HB 878. It's on the second page, the second from the top. This is an insurance bill that allows insurance companies to accept notification of to cancel a policy via phone call if they so choose, and requires them to document it if they do choose to allow for cancellation via phone call.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Hanson.
Happy Monday, Mr. Chairman. I'm asking for House Bill 904, which is on the middle part of page 4. It amends the Recreational Property Act in response to a recent Georgia Supreme Court decision. This bill creates basically parity among patrons, where if everyone gets in free, then there's no liability to the property owner, but if one person pays, then the owner is liable. I'm happy to answer any questions or explain the bill further.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kendrick.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I am presenting and asking for House Resolution 1036, which is in the middle of the second page. And this is a resolution drafted by the Georgia Department of Education and supported by them, but this urges the state of Georgia to fund a public awareness campaign in support of STEM-related fields for students and for parents.
No questions. Thank you. Lordy mercy, Rick. Have you been able to eat dinner or anything so far this session? Because you got to be have you been eating dinner this session?
Only 1 or 2, I think.
Okay. You ain't had time to do nothing else. You've been up here so much. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I ask for your favorable consideration under structured rule, 5th one up from the bottom, HB 854. This makes certain non-profit horse shows, rodeos, livestock events, or exhibits tax-free. There's never been any tax collected on them, never been any paid in, so there's no negative impact on any.
That's a far cry from burying folks.
Yes, sir.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Jones.
Thank you, members of the committee and Mr. Chairman. Page 4, 7th bill down. HB 879 is an expanded public notice by requiring an ad be placed in the local legal organ when coal ash ponds are being drained in those communities. This bill has the full negotiated support of Georgia Power and EPD at the commission level. Ask for your favorable consideration. This is important because this is occurring today in our communities.
No questions. Thank you. Ms. Bennett.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I stand again to request House Resolution 1016 under open rules, second from the bottom. This resolution is supported by DPH and encourages the continued collaborations between DCH and DPH in education about diabetes. The ultimate aim is to decrease the proliferation and growing rates of diabetes.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Chandler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I bring to you today on page 4, the 5th from the bottom, HB 971, which encourages our public schools to allow testing opportunities for those young people in educational programs that do not allow them that are not allowed, I should say, to administer the preliminary SAT, which is the PSAT, and also for 11th graders, which is the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test, and AP exams. And this is supported by DOE.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My bill, HB 852, can be found on the second page. The first bill. What that bill would do is that it will allow students that move to another school's attendance zone to finish out the school year.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Hawkins.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to recommit HB 818 back to the floor. That's LC 372612S.
Y'all remember Friday, that was a clerical error in what was reported to the clerk's office, and rather than go through that chaos, they had an insurance committee meeting this morning at 8 o'clock and fix that, so it's back on. It'll be to okay. Mr. Powell.
Mr. Chairman, I ask for HB 811. It's on the last page under structured rule. And it allows the Department of Revenue to contract with private vendors to help the department identify non-compliant and underpaying taxpayers of sales tax. And I also ask for HR 1089, which is the last one under structured rule, which is an urging resolution asking Congress to pass the Federal Marketplace Fairness Act.
Ms. Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 3, top of the page, House Bill 519 has to do with step therapy and setting up clinical review criteria for appeals. Thank you.
Mr. Willard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two bills. As for on the third sheet, toward the bottom, House Bill 803. This is a bill that I brought at the behest of the prosecuting attorneys and the GBI, is to really close the loop on the crimes against the elderly and disabled people in our state, where they're doing movement of these individuals as a way of avoiding prosecution as well as finding what they're doing when they're taking advantage of these elderly and disabled. The other bill I have, Mr. Chairman, is on page 4 at the very bottom, House Bill 998. This is a bill that is exercising the authority that the General Assembly has to set up a pilot court for the business cases. And this really goes as a companion bill to the resolution from the governor's office dealing with the establishment of a constitutional business court. So we can go ahead and start the project working to see what needs to be done as far as legislation in the future by the General Assembly. And two last things, I'd like to put my name by House Bill 738 on the first page, Mary Margaret Oliver's bill. I had her bring this bill at my behest. Is a bill that deals with probate law. And then my seatmate, Mr. Dominic Larica, has a bill on the second page, House Bill 899. I would like to put my name besides that. Thank you.
Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Page 4, second bill down, HB 831. I'd like to ask your favorable consideration. Simply creates the Education First Council to deal with the disabled community.
Mr. A. Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the bottom of the first page, under modified open, House Bill 775. This puts Georgia code for the Georgia Real Estate and Appraisals Board into sync with the Dodd-Frank provisions so that the federal government won't be managing our appraisal companies, and the Real Estate Commission will. On the second page, under modified structure toward the bottom, HB 410. This is a bill that's been worked on for the last couple of years. It would impose certain fees and caps on homeowner associations and the management companies, so they'll quit sticking it so deep into the homeowner association members as well as the consumers when it comes times for closing. And also, there's a bill that didn't make it Friday afternoon to the blue sheet, but I want to mention that. It's an administration bill that we've worked on all year. This clearly defines that GSACs and the fusion centers, that they will be under the control of the Criminal Investigation Division of the GBI and not GEMA, but also provides certain things for GEMA for emergency board. This was cleaned up by some of the Sheriff's Association originally had concerns with that bill, and now they are in support of the bill. Been a few things that's happened since then. I'd also like to add my name beside the Joshua's Law 855 and Mr. Clark's Private Detective Cleanup Bill 817.
Let me go over here for a second, back to 410. An amendment was recommended on that. There is still some negotiations going on, and so on Wednesday, more than likely, that bill will have an amendment to it, just to let you know we hadn't got it worked out yet.
Thank you so much.
Ms. Dempsey.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 2, fifth from the top, HB 920. This is a DFAX bill brought to us to help them access records that they need quicker than they're able to get when going through the court system, in 2 specific instances for children in foster care that are being adopted when abuse, neglect, or serious or fatal injury has occurred. And then at the very bottom of that page, under modified structure, HB 494. This is brought to us by DECAL in many places to bring us into compliance for federal funding. It also changes the criminal record check. 6 months. I thought it went away from me. I'm sorry. For 6 months, if you've been out of work for 6 months, you need to go back and have that reauthorized, as well as hearsay being allowed in emergency hearings because they are so quick, 48 hours. Also on page 3, HB 647, the pilot dealing with obesity and overweight members of our state health benefit plan, 2 years. 4 weight loss medications with a lot of counseling and follow-up to see if it is feasible.
Ms. Bellinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask for House Bill 834. It allows victims of domestic violence to break their leases, and it also expands the time that folks can respond to temporary protective orders. Oh, I'm sorry. It's the third one down on page 4.
Mr. Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got bills on page 5. There are 3 bills under the structure rule. All of these bills are dealing with the property tax assessment process and providing protection for taxpayer bill of rights. First one is 373, dealing with the CUVA, particular definitions of what constitutes documentation, also clarifying the underlying 2 acres do not need to be recorded, plat or survey. 374 is regarding the appeals process, another fair measure that provides taxpayer protection, also provides for a remedy if the tax assessors do not provide timely due process through the appeals hearing. And then 888 is also regarding that process. It's dealing with the Freeport exemptions, simply keeps up with our continuing growing manufacturing sector, also provides timely requirements on the behalf of the tax assessors. One more, Mr. Chairman, that's the HR 1194 regarding the retroactive study committee regarding the retroactive billing of ER visits.
Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to put my name by 3 bills that came out of Natural Resource and Environment Committee. They've already been presented. Page 2, House Bill 885, McCall's Agriculture Burn Bill. House Bill 332, the enabling legislation for the Georgia Outdoor Stewardship Act. And then House Bill 879, Jeff Jones' bill, putting the notice in the legal organ as well. Thank you.
Mr. Brockway.
Apologize for not being here earlier, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to come. On your second page, about midway through the page under modified open, House Bill 963. This would encourage cooperation between the Department of Education and the technical college system to develop a list of industry credentials in high demand industries that students can earn those criteria and take them and use them for jobs or further education. I'll be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Ms. Hughley, do you have a question? Never mind. It's Mr. Green. Ms. Thomas.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I bring before you on the first page CJ's Law, House Bill 765. And what this bill simply does, it expands the definition of serious injury by vehicle to include individuals who leave the scene of an accident. The bill provides that any person who commits bodily harm and leaves the scene of the accident will be, if convicted, for not less than 3 nor more than 10 years.
No questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to put my name beside House Bill 899 and House Resolution 888. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
mention that when you did Friday. You got her on? Ms. Jones?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to request House Bill 973. On the fourth page.
Okay.
I presented it last week.
No questions. That was the bill that we had in the Rules Committee on Ethics. Mr. Smyrie?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to request House Resolution 1016 by Representative Bennett and also House Bill 852 by Representative Smith.
Okay. This will be the first calendar for Wednesday. Okay. Under open rule, HB 759. Any opposed? It's on. Under modified open, HB 489. Any opposed? It's on. Under modified open, HB 754. Any opposed? It's under modified open, HB 775. Any opposed? Under modified open, HB 956. Any opposed? It's under modified structure, HB 410. Remember, that one will probably have some kind of an amendment. Any opposed? It's modified structure, HB 696. And y'all do remember that the amendment we passed a while ago. Any opposed? It's under modified structure, HB 781. Any opposition? Under modified structure, HB 791. Any opposed? It's on. Under modified structure, HB 808. Any opposed? Under modified structure, HB 831. Any opposed? It's on. Under modified structure, HB 844. Any opposition? Under modified structure, HB 930. Any opposition? It's on. Under modified structure, HB 938. Any opposition? Under modified structure, HB 940. Any opposition? It's on. Under modified structure, HB 951. Any opposition? It's on. Modified structure, HB 973. Any opposition? It's on. Modified structure, HB 986. Any opposition? It's on. Modified structure, HR 992. Any opposition? It's on. Under modified structure, SB 2. Any opposition? It's we have opposition. All those in favor of SB 2, raise your hand. Those opposed, same sign. It's on. Under structured, HB 811. Any opposed? It's on. That'll give you a start.